majority thing. That's new to me, and I don't understand what that means. Could you go a little into that and how that's
Sorry to jump in front of you. I just wanted to get
Sure. And we can both do that if you want, but it's something that actually that has been worked on for several years, several cycles, and they were never able to achieve the majority representation that they had been trying to do. So this is the first time that they actually have been able to carve out some minority districts that are represented and carefully chosen by the minorities that live in them or that reside in them, so they have a better chance of electing a minority representative. So for example, in Worcester, Representative Padoni's district changed significantly to be carved or positioned to be a more minority represented district. And he's going to run in that district again, but someone from the Latino population can run and has a better chance because of the population that it makes up, and they will represent the Latino population. The same thing in Boston. There are some issues in the city as well. So they've tried to balance the districts, if you will, to be more balanced and representative of the people that live in them. I don't know what else if you want to add.
No, I think it really, for those of us out here, it doesn't really, we don't really notice it as much because we have an Asian mayor in Fitchburg, we have Latino city councilors, we have Latino school committee members, we have women representatives and senators, so we sort of have already broken through that ceiling that a lot of places feel that a minority candidate could not win because they may not have the resources or the population of supporters that they would have to fight against someone else. And that's really when it comes down to the bigger districts, more of the Springfields, the Bostons, and it's something that we have to contend with because that's what gets us into court. That's what brings up the court cases. And so then everyone says, okay, well, here's our map, but it could change if we go to court. And so with the population shift, there was a really big effort by Senator Rosenberg and Representative Moran to make sure that everybody had a chance to run for office or someone in office that they feel that they could represent that would best represent their needs.
It was more the cities. You see it much more in the
big cities.
I thought of my other thing. I knew that I was going to think of it. See, there you go. The issue that I was going to talk about is when, for example, when I went into Westminster, I had been asked by the Board of Selectmen to go in because, understandably, people were very concerned in the town and on the board and in the administration about what carving and dividing Westminster in half was going to mean for them. So I went into a televised meeting and talked about it. And one of the things that was raised to me was, well, you know, Representative, it's easy. Why don't they give you all of Westminster back and you give all of Sterling to Representative Naughton because you share Sterling with him? And it's just not that easy, and that's what the senator was talking about. It's not as simple as just that number game of just switch two towns, because if I were to take that other half of Westminster back, that would affect 5 other representatives that surround me. Because then what happens with Sterling, you know, Sterling would go to Hank Naughton, but then Sterling would push him over population, so then he would have to dump something else, and then that would get dumped onto Representative Di Natale, Representative Benson, so then their population's over. So it just starts snowballing. So it is like a giant puzzle, and I give them credit. I mean, there were thousands of hours that went into it to try to make 160 representative districts, 40 senatorial districts work. And I don't know how it actually all worked out. It finally did, but it was like a house of cards. And, you know, some of the other guidelines that they also had to deal with were, you know, looking at the minority-majority issue, but then there were some other rules. You know, towns, you had to have towns that, of course, always touch within the district, but you also couldn't divide a town if it was less than, I believe, 2,800, 2,500. A town of, which makes sense, a town of 2,500 people or less could not be split. So when you look at the western part of the state and our part of the state, you know, that eliminates a whole host of towns that can never be split. So they had to be factored into a district correctly. So it's this giant puzzle that took a lot of effort to make fit. And everyone's not 100% happy. Everyone understands that. We try to be as happy as we can about it, and some people are not as happy as others, but in the long run, it'll work out. So.
The other thing, too, is that if I lost Townsend, I would have been a whole new Worcester district. I wouldn't have been Worcester and Middlesex anymore. So you would have created a whole different district in that place, because Townsend is now the only, because I lost Ashby, Townsend is now the only Middlesex district that I have. So you also have to, you know, be cognizant of that. And I know that we tend to talk about it as our districts, and we talk about it as what we're happy with or what we're not happy with up on Beacon Hill, but the truth of the matter is we all got into this business to represent people. And it just so happens that for 10 years, when you're used to having a certain district, there's a transition. I mean, you now have to start to think a little differently when you have different cities and towns in your district you didn't once have. And that's just been a little bit of an adjustment for some people to see.